Welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm very excited to be here. Thank you for having me. This is my first SOL conference, and I have been finding it extremely interesting. Adam just talked about the importance of power and love and how both are necessary to solve complex problems. I would like to talk about one particular complex problem, the need to reduce poverty in developing countries. More specifically, I'd like to share some ideas on what it may take to work together as part of a broader development community to improve the lives of the poor. So my focus is going to be on delivery, and delivery really can mean in this context delivery of services, goods, training, knowledge, finance, whatever it is that we can do as a community to improve the lives of the poor. So the question that then raises out of that is there an approach, is there maybe a new framework that we could use or develop that would allow us to be a little more systematic about delivery? But before I go there, let me just add a few words to tell you who we are and what we do. So the World Bank is a truly global organization. We have 188 member countries. We have 15,000 staff from 170 nationalities, and half of them work in 120 country offices. So we really sort of have a population of staff with all sorts of backgrounds and from different cultures. We work in a large number of sectors: health, education, transport, finance, energy, economics, you name it, we do it. The bank's mission, as Heidi just mentioned, is to eliminate extreme poverty by 2030. And extreme poverty for us is the percentage of people living of less than $1.25 a day. And also to increase shared prosperity, which we look at as the income growth in every country of the bottom 40% of the population. And so with 1.3 billion people still living on less than $1.25 a day, we clearly have our work cut out for us. And one thing that is absolutely obvious is that we cannot do this alone. At the same time, the global development context is changing, and the bank has really become a small, really tiny player if you compare the finance that we provide to public investment in developing countries. Governments can really turn to many sources of finance and advice today. I heard Ari say a couple of times over the last days how finance is really not the issue anymore when you start a new company. This is a little bit also the case in development. So as an institution, we have to reflect how we can better collaborate, create partnerships, and also add focus to our own work to make a difference. When I joined the bank a very long time ago, I'm not going to tell you how long ago, I don't want to date myself. But then we were really, as an institution, very focused on providing finance. And also policy advice, trying to get policy advice right. Today, our clients often tell us that they feel they have the right policies, and they also have access to sizable funding, but sometimes they just don't get the right results. So we as a development community are really faced with a huge delivery failure or challenge. When we think about, 280,000 women die every year in childbirth, we have 1.3 billion people who still don't have access to electricity, which is incredibly important for developing their income. And 2.5 billion people still have no or limited access to improved water and sanitation, which is incredibly important, as we know, for health. So what's missing for successful delivery? Looking across our own work, what we find is we have a lot of individual examples where we really can point to successful delivery, but what's really missing is to sort of get a better sense to bring these isolated examples together to make global progress happen across countries and sectors. And in order to do this, we really need to work together to collect evidence and share examples of delivery success that then countries can use and adapt to their own unique context. We notice, though, we see that successful delivery really happens when innovations are brought to scale, and then countries can build and learn from their neighbors and the success of their neighbors. They can learn from experiences around the globe, and in turn they can also share their own successes. And I would like to share one example with you where this has worked. I'm going to focus on one particular issue that I already mentioned, which is the fact that 2.5 billion people don't have access to improved water and sanitation. And this has incredible impacts on health and mortality, particularly in children. 3/4 of these people live in rural areas and are really hard to reach. So in 2007, a partnership was initiated between the governments of India, Indonesia, and Tanzania. And at the same time, these countries were used as learning laboratories. A very heavy focus was put on data collection, understanding the constraints in supply, as well as social and cultural aspects that affect demand and behavior. Different stakeholders were brought together to form a strong enabling environment. So the local private sector to produce affordable goods. Affordability very important for poor people to consider to build latrines and toilets, and to keep up with demand. Households to build, use, and maintain the improved sanitation. Facilities and communities to unite to become what they call openification free. And the role of communities was incredibly important in terms of changing behavior and changing culture. Local governments promoted sanitation, enabled and regulated the private sector, and monitored progress, and development partners finally came in to provide technical advice, provide guidance, facilitate research, help with design and implementation. But they were just one small part of the equation. So monitoring was designed to be used by governments in real time to make programs effective and better as they were implemented. Lessons were used to inform policy change. Very important, the learning immediately had an impact on policy. And through this approach, a theory of change was developed, basically looking into how to strengthen supply, how to generate demand, how to strengthen the enabling environment. A learning strategy was developed accompanying the program and working with all these different stakeholders that I just mentioned. And it aligned the key learning questions to knowledge gaps and brought out lessons on what worked, what didn't, and why. And this slide just gives you, we're not going to go into detail because there will be no time. And probably you can't read it because it's too small. But it's there to just show you that around the project cycle, what was really important was collaboration, knowledge sharing, knowledge capture, feedback, and sort of drawing lessons learned that immediately would be feeding back into the cycle. And if you think of the World Bank as an institution that in its early years was really focused on building infrastructure, helping to rebuild Europe, trying to find best practice technical solutions, this has been a huge shift in terms of working towards a much more collaborative, more dynamic approach to problem solving. So in the end, after 5 years, the program helped governments to scale up access to improved sanitation for 22 million people and encouraged 19 million people to stop practicing open defecation in the 13 focus countries. Looking at this and other examples, a few elements emerge that are seen as critical for implementing adaptive, innovative approaches at scale. We call these approaches the elements of science of delivery, and it's still a somewhat experimental concept. So let me mention some of the elements. Strong focus on the client and the context. So what's really important is to be clear on what the problem is before coming up with a solution. And that then leads to citizen outcomes. Evidence to achieve results. The use of local evidence, as I talked about in the rural water sanitation examples, to refine solutions which then contribute to a global body of knowledge. A multidimensional response through multi-stakeholder coalitions, multi-sector perspectives. Look at a problem from different perspectives and build support for implementation. Adaptive implementation and learning that is forward-looking. We also mentioned that in the example. Leverage evidence-based knowledge to inform the next step and make sure it's implemented in the next step. Leadership and motivation for change. Very important. Bring in those that are influential in forming opinion and bringing about change. And in the case of the sanitation example, it was really the local communities that played a very important role. I'll give you one very quick example, but I don't really have the time, but I thought it was striking. When they tried to figure out what would facilitate change in behavior, in Indonesia, they started a communication campaign that was basically built on the concept of shame. So they had very funny cartoons showing somebody who was called Uncle Shit, who was completely disgusting. Nobody wanted to have to do with him. Everybody kept away from him. They tried the same thing in Tanzania, and it didn't really respond to the sort of culture and incentive system in the communities there. So what they figured out in the end was that what they would need to communicate is by subscribing to the program, they would be seen as leading change, becoming modern, and playing a leadership role compared to other communities who had not adopted this approach yet. So the pictures were completely different. They had sort of mottos about, leading change and becoming modern. So how does this affect the way we do business at the bank? Currently, we are introducing a new structure. We're moving away from a regional focus that was sort of looking more at the region-specific problems to a global practice model in order to better capture and identify knowledge across all the regions and countries, and also foster multi-practice teams who can really work together and solve problems together. We are building a knowledge base on the science of delivery, and the case I just mentioned is just one example. We have started with a little booklet of 22 of those cases, and we're now have engaged in a partnership with Harvard, and we're working on many, many more to create a library of science of delivery. We also try to create more space for learning from experience, sort of trying to implement or to integrate this, learning from our failures into the workflow with the objective to create evidence-based knowledge that then will inform the policies that we advise governments. We promote partnerships and work as one World Bank group together with our private sector institutions. We have two of them, the IFC and MIGA, and we sort of try to bring these together much more closely in order to crowd in resources, expertise, and ideas from the private sector and better understand our client needs. I have 1 minute, and I will close with a call for action. I just want to reach out to all of you to sort of encourage you to work with us, because there are a lot of ways of engaging with the work that we are doing with our partners. Help us mobilize global knowledge. The World Bank Institute has just launched an open learning campus, which is a very interactive platform for online learning, and we just started our first massive open online course, a MOOC, if you've heard of it, on climate change with thousands of participants and inputs. Check out the South-South Knowledge Exchange work, which is also represented on our website, which is really facilitating peer learning between countries, which we find to be much more effective than learning that is sort of top-down from development partners. And it facilitates multi-sector workshops, partnering relationships, study tours, etc. And then finally engage in the bank's open data and geomapping, which is an interactive and open source platform which allows to show who's funding what in developing countries, which could be very, very useful if you overlay it with poverty data in terms of finding out where you really have gaps in delivery and in service delivery, and also provide a platform for citizen engagement and monitoring. As I said initially, we can't do this alone. This newer way of engagement requires support from our friends and partners. We're looking forward to work with you. Thank you.